Hello and welcome to Not to Get Political, the podcast where we delve...
I cannot be before you start now. We're still rolling, and 3, 2, 1, action.
Hello and welcome to Not to Get Political, the podcast where we delve into the world of politics and hope to remain unscathed. Today we are talking Barbie, the film of the summer that's got everyone talking. To join me for this discussion, I am first joined by Solana, a musician and activist for LGBTQ rights, climate change and racial inequality, who you might know as Little Miss Solana on TikTok and Instagram. And then we will hear from the writer and academic Julia Bell, an author of essays, novels and poetry. Her work is featured in many publications such as The New Statesman and The White Review. Her most recent book is Hymnal, a collection of poetry published by Parthian, and she teaches at Birkbeck, University of London. Solana, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm really well. So what did you think of the film?
I really liked the film. I think that it was a good mix of like light-hearted and like also emotional at times, like very emotional. It was very, I think a lot of people have said that it was very different from what they were expecting.
What were you expecting?
I don't know, because it's like, I guess it was different to what I was expecting, but equally it was, it was interesting. Like, I think also because of the, like, there's been a lot of hype around the movie, so I guess it was a lot of pressure for it to live up to any sort of expectations that there were. But I thought it was a great film.
So what was the sort of the, because obviously like we should probably say like there will be spoilers throughout this, so if you haven't watched the film, that's honestly on you, not on me. But no, I mean I thought it was really, I wasn't sure what to expect either, but then I really liked it. I thought especially the way that like the patriarchy was presented, the big P, I feel like that's obviously going to come up.
P.
So yeah, pushing P. No, what did you think of that?
About
the topics that were covered and how they were covered.
I mean, I thought that it was good. Like, I think that it's interesting because I think people have reacted on kind of both extreme ends of it. Like, people that are like feminists have kind of said that it's very watered down and sort of not really real feminism in that way.
What do they mean by that? I want to look into that.
I mean, I guess it's just very like simplified. I think that the messages would kind of be seen as very basic teachings of feminism, but I think sometimes like it is important to kind of talk about those basic things because I mean, it's for everyone, right? The film.
Well, it is a 12A.
Yeah,
so
like it's a children's film, but I think it also appeals to like older people because it speaks about like topics that everyone would be interested in. But I guess at like the other end of the spectrum, it's like people were saying, "Oh my gosh, it's so extreme, like it's radical." But I didn't really get that from that. I thought it was kind of like an introduction.
I know. I mean, obviously, I'm a bloke, and I never felt at any point like I was being like the finger was being waggled at me or pointed at me. For me, it was like it was showing how the patriarchy affects both men and women in different ways, but everyone is a victim to a certain extent, but obviously varying. So there's the hierarchy of victimhood.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was. I did like how it sort of showed Ken's journey, like kind of discovering patriarchy and kind of how. I feel like it kind of explained how it is a learned behaviour.
It's
not about the horses.
I want to make that very clear.
I mean, maybe a little bit about the horses in some ways.
Yeah.
But I think it was interesting. It was kind of talking about how it's a learned thing. Like I think it's something that is like the patriarchy is something that is taught to everyone that is within the society. And you saw that like when Ken returned to Barbie Land and the Barbies were like, I don't know, they were kind of...
But it was flipped on its head. I guess in the original, at the start of the film, it's very much like a reverse of the patriarchy. So the Barbies are in positions of leadership and in like high earning roles. And the roles of the Kens is just to sit, beach. Their job is beach. That's what they do. Their job is just beach.
I want to beach.
I want to do beach. I'm going to a beach soon. No, my job will be beach. No, it's that's what they did. And then obviously they go off to the real world. And then Ken learns about the patriarchy and what it's like, and decides, oh no, I think we need a bit more of this. And then sort of comes back to Barbie Land and completely flips everything on its head. I thought that was quite clever, actually, the way that they did it.
I wasn't that was one of the things I mean, I guess, I really wasn't expecting that Ken would be sort of, I don't know. I think it was like a certain point in the film, it seemed like he was going to become the villain, like at that kind of point when he returned. But I mean, I think really the overall message that I got from the film was it's about self-discovery and kind of like independence.
So why do you think people have reacted differently to the Barbie film?
I don't know. I did actually look through some reviews before I came. And I don't know, it's very funny, like it's equally like there's 5-star reviews as there is 1-star reviews. And a lot of the 1-star reviews are sort of talking about like what you were saying before about it being like man-hating and really anti-man. But I thought it was really ironic, like some of the reviews, because one of them that I read was sort of like, it was like all of the men characters were really one-dimensional and they didn't have any lines and they only spoke about the Barbies. But it's like, I don't know, it's kind of interesting that they picked up on that. But then in a lot of films, when that is kind of generally, especially in the past, like I think there's obviously more like films that are about women and centered around women. But I think in the past it was like that's why the Bechdel test exists, right? Yeah. So one of the reviews saying, the male characters lacked any significant development. They were one-dimensional, bland, and existed primarily to either praise Barbie or act as obstacles for her to overcome. There are so many films which are like that.
In reverse.
In reverse, exactly. This reduction of male characters to supporting roles devoid of any substance or complexity was a disservice not only to the male characters themselves, but also to the narrative as a whole.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of thing of like people don't really notice how much of themselves they are in the media everywhere until they're not suddenly, until suddenly they're not the center of the story of the film, and it's suddenly like, well, I'm not represented, and they don't really know what to do with those feelings of not seeing themselves, and they don't know how to relate to that as well when it's not kind of about it, when the characters are not portrayed in a way that they can relate to.
Well, it's interesting what you're saying, because I read a review in the Daily Mail by the Daily Mail's Sarah Vine, a journalist, she was very less keen on the representation of men in the film. She wrote, "It's a deeply anti-man movie, an extension of all that TikTok feminism that paints any form of masculinity other than the most anodyne as toxic and predatory. Every male character is either an idiot, a bigot, or a sad, rather pathetic loser. If the roles were reversed and a male director made a film about how all women were hysterical, neurotic, gold-digging witches, it would be denounced quite rightly as deeply offensive and sexist." I don't know. I guess, I mean, everyone's going to have different opinions on it, but it's like, I read some of these reviews and I'm like, did we watch the same film? That's what I mean. I mean, like Ben Shapiro setting fire to Barbies, which, I mean, I want to say about this. There's the photo of him on Twitter outside with the Barbie poster, and he's got his notepad. When I went to watch it, I tried to take notes, and you can see them here. My handwriting isn't very good, but I only wrote a few because of how dark it was in there. I couldn't actually see what I was writing. And then to see him with that pad of paper with the notes, and I'm like, that is next level hating.
And I feel like a lot of people were taking it too seriously as well. Like, it's a Barbie film. Like, it's Barbie. And I think, I don't know, people were so heavily offended by it and have taken the messages so seriously. But I think a lot of the messages of the film were supposed to be ironic and kind of sarcastic in a way. Like, it's humorous.
At the end of the day, it's a 12A film. It's a summer blockbuster film. You know, parents are going to take their kids to go and watch it, and hopefully, because of the things that we mentioned and how much they're mentioned, it will get a conversation going. It's like taking the knee in football, for example. No one thinks that taking the knee at a Crystal Palace game is going to end racism, but what it's going to do is it's going to get a conversation going. Oh, why are they taking the knee? They're doing it to highlight racism, bigotry, and they're, you know, to try and end it and address the issues that are going on. Oh, okay. And what are those issues? And then that's how it gets the conversation going. And I think Barbie, the film to a certain extent, is going to do that. So when I see the reviews and it's very much like surface level stuff, it's like, it's a film for kids. It's not going to be hard hitting, deep, critical, intersectional feminism. There could have been more of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's they've put a lot of responsibility kind of onto Greta Gerwig for her to like have a solution and provide a solution for what people should be doing to kind of end like sexism and all of these things. But I think
It's never going to end. It's never. And the thing is, that's, you know, like this film. I think they actually addressed it in the in the film with like the CEO board, and they're like, no, we acknowledge the role of women. You know, they do this, and you know that this is our biggest kind of our biggest market. Really, that's what we cater to. It is the commercialization of it.
I guess it's the hype that kind of surrounded the movie as well. That
it's
people,
like Oppenheimer and everything.
It's like people were kind of obsessing over it because it's been, I don't know, so heavily promoted.
There's the speech that America Ferrera gives before they launch their big plot to take back Barbie World, and some of the stuff was covered there. What did you make of that? Because I know a lot of women have related to it and what the messaging that was being said. What do you think? I
mean, yeah, I mean, I agreed with everything that she said. Yeah, I thought it was kind of like textbook, the kind of thing you'd read in like an inspirational quote on Instagram or something like that. Like it really was like that. But I think a lot of people kind of took it away as being like, I don't know, wishy-washy, sort of like, I don't know how to put it really.
I guess it's surface level, but
surface level.
It is like sometimes you need to hit the surface first before you go any deeper.
Because it was such a big film, like there was so much hype around the film. I think that sometimes people need to hear things put in a simple way, to kind of understand the message. Because I think that, I don't know, if you've heard it being not overcomplicated, but I think sometimes it can be inaccessible. There's a lot of different layers to feminism, I think, and it's obviously evolved a lot over the last.
If someone
years.
like slaps a book in front of you, like, this is first wave feminism, you read this and then we'll go on to second wave, then we'll do third wave, we're going to cover this. It would be boring.
There's a lot to cover on it.
I know, it's like any like political ideology or any sort of theory based stuff. It's, you know, it is, a lot of it is quite boring. There's some interesting stuff in it, and you get to that and you learn about it. But sometimes you just want to learn the interesting stuff and then get onto the not less interesting, but
more
it's
complicated
like more
ideas,
complicated.
Yeah. You know what else I really liked about the film? I liked that they really could have like kind of centered the film around love.
Yes.
Like I think that would have been a really cliche kind of way, and I did expect some sort of relationship to, like, from Ken and Barbie, because that's what you'd think, right? Yeah. But I liked how it was kind of untraditional in that way, and there was kind of like no like love theme at all throughout the film, except for like kind of a general love of community and like people,
self-love, I suppose, to a certain extent.
It was more about that, which I just really liked, because I think what I was predicting, why it was one of the things why it was different for me than what I was expecting, is I thought it would kind of end that way with Ken and Barbie, like they finally solved feminism and now they can be together. But it was kind of still like, I don't like you, do you know what I mean? That's kind of what she was
I don't like
saying.
You like that. Yeah,
I think it was important that kind of him, like Ken, learning that rejection as well. Yeah, it commented on a lot of things,
because that's the big thing, like it's particularly in the last few years when like the topic of consent has come up, and the idea of like, oh, how do I speak to women in like the Me Too era? And it's like, speak to people normally, speak to people however you would, just don't be a weirdo. It's quite easy. And I guess that sort of that lesson that is being taught within the film, and also I mean like showing how the patriarchy affects men. You know, men don't know where they stand on a lot of these things. It's very complicated. You look at the male suicide rate, which obviously wasn't brought up in the film, but it is valid. Like that feeling of I don't belong. What do? I want to be assertive, but I can't be too assertive. I don't want to be submissive. I don't want to be beta or alpha. And I think anyone who refers to themselves as an alpha is not. It's very tongue-in-cheek. You got to refer to it like that. But yeah, I thought it was. I thought like I felt represented in that film. Not that I was looking for representation. I was there going on to see what it was like and see why Ben Shapiro was setting fire to Barbies in a bin. You know,
I think it's. I think it was important because I think a lot of people like that have similar views to Ben Shapiro, like they believe that feminism is just about women and it's about hating men.
Yes.
And I think that those people didn't really watch the film. They saw kind of what they wanted to see. But I think in reality, the patriarchy affects men equally as much as it affects women. And it's all of these societal pressures which are kind of like, they affect all of us.
Yeah.
You know.
I guess as what you've said, like the perception of feminism and the kind of skewing of the word. It's like the word woke, for example. The word woke means to be aware to injustices within society like racism, sexism, homophobia. But now it's just been skewed to be like, oh, anything I don't like is woke.
I think that there's kind of the big question as well about whether a movie about Barbie could even ever be a feminist movie because of sort of the origins of Barbie.
Okay.
Obviously, like more recently, Barbie in the last decade or whatever, Barbie has become more forward thinking and they have a lot more diversity in the kind of Barbies that they make. But I think that it would be strange to ignore the fact that Barbies were created and like over sexualized originally, and they are kind of the beauty standard, I think, in a very big way. And I think that they've impacted a lot of women's body image, the way that we kind of view ourselves in society, and they've created a lot of kind of, I don't know, issues, very anti-feminist issues, I guess you would say, that kind of make women feel more self-conscious, and it kind of encourages that, I think, originally. And I know that like a lot of people, like it was like they did mention it in the film that it was ironic that like after what's her name, America
Ferrera's daughter,
Ferrera's after her big speech, like that it was to Margot Robbie, like literally
Helen Mirren brings that up,
the beauty standard, like blonde and like would be considered like pretty much like the perfect ideal woman.
That is the thing with
the
Margot
Barbie,
Robbie,
you know. But I don't know. I guess a lot of it is ironic. Like maybe it's the irony of it, which is what Greta Gerwig is sort of trying to create.
I guess it's like trying to hold a mirror and sort of showing it. And I guess they reference that with the narrator when Margot Robbie is having like a bit of a breakdown.
Yeah.
She's saying like, I don't feel pretty enough, something like this. And then Helen Mirren's like, yeah, no, you can't get Margot Robbie to say this stuff. It doesn't hit the same. And
And also like all of the Barbies and like the main characters, everyone was conventionally attractive. I think that that's important to note as well. And I feel like that could get lost in sort of like the message that they were trying to send about the insecurities of women. And
do you think maybe
it's
like not saying it's like I'm more than a pretty face, like Emma Mackey's Barbie has a Nobel Prize in physics, like that, trying to show that, you know, oh, I can be pretty but I can also be smart.
Yeah, I would say that it's ironic because of the fact that it's kind of not a reflection of the kind of reality, like in the way that there was obviously an astronaut Barbie before that there was actually an actual woman in NASA's astronaut corps.
That's really weird. Like,
it's
you know,
strange.
yeah, I know.
It's very strange.
Do you think maybe it's like well, I guess it comes back to this idea of like aspiration and like, oh yeah, women can do this, women can do that, but stay in your fucking place because we don't want you upsetting the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a lot of talk and no action, I guess, because it's I don't know really like whether Barbie has had the like Mattel sort of like the organization, what involvement they've had in feminist movements other than just saying you can do it, girls. I mean, I guess that there is something to be said in conversations, because I think that people were afraid to have, like we was talking about earlier about how it can be awkward bringing up political things, but I think everything is kind of considered political now. Like it's hard to say something that isn't political. Like if I say that, I don't know, it's hard being a woman in 2023, it's like, oh my gosh, like why do you think that? Like it's immediately a political statement. I think it's important though, like how Barbie is kind of a simplified, like it's kind of simplified a lot of the important feminist points. I think that it shows that it's important to have the conversations, and hopefully it will make it easier for people to have the conversations in a more accessible way.
So what impact do you think this film will have?
I think that it wasn't super impactful to me, to be honest. Like it was nice to kind of see like a film that was, the base of it was supposedly about women empowerment, and I think that a lot of the messages were very positive and positive to men and women. I thought that it was also about self-discovery for men as well, and just sort of about unity of like people working together.
Yeah.
But I think that still it was...
It felt like a very silly film.
Yeah,
I found myself giggling.
It was silly.
I haven't giggled in years.
It was quite funny.
Yeah.
I did laugh a lot. I don't know. I don't think the representation of the film was as good as it could have been.
What do you mean by that?
People talk about sort of like white feminism and sort of how it kind of focuses on like white women's struggles, and I think that it's hard to say, because I guess a lot of it, the film was ironic, right? Like I think what I've got from it is a lot of it was irony, and obviously Margot Robbie is playing Barbie. She's playing stereotypical Barbie.
Yeah.
So I think it makes sense that she would be sort of like kind of, she's coming into understanding feminism and sort of what her effect on the people around her in the real world, like the kind of struggles that they're going through. And
also, I mean, like, yeah, as you said, she's playing stereotypical Barbie, who was a white blonde woman. So obviously the issues that she will face are issues that a white blonde woman would face. So she's not going to face the issues that, say, a black woman would face in society, or an Asian woman would face. She's going to face issues that are inherently exclusive to a white blonde woman.
Yeah. And I think that it was very like, I don't know, it didn't touch any more on that kind of thing. Like if we're talking about it in terms of it being a feminist film, which I feel like everyone kind of is.
Yeah.
Is a film a feminist film just because it brings up the fact that there is inequality?
Yeah.
And the fact that there are things that women struggle with.
Do you think people just want to put it, you know how like with, you know the song This Is America by Childish Gambino? When that came out and everyone hailed it as being like this pioneering, it's going to change the way we perceive everything. Like it's, you know, all the imagery there. And it's a good song, and and the music video is very good. But it's like, are we giving this stuff a bit too much hype? Kind of the same way that the Barbie film kind of is to a certain extent.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to say, because I guess so gradually, like, it's hard to kind of pinpoint changes in people's ideas and feelings about things.
You know, like with like films about like, say, like Black struggle, for example, and like there's the film I'm thinking of is like The Hate U Give, which I don't know if you've seen it.
That is a good film.
It's a good film, but then
really
like it does feel like there is like the sort of like the Hollywood ending to a certain extent, and like that's not always going to be the case. Like thinking like the wake of the BLM movement, and I feel very saying this to a black woman, but it's it's like, I guess, you know, everyone thinks there's going to be this big change, but then what actually has changed in the US post 2020 BLM movement? I would argue not a lot, but then obviously I don't live in the US, I'm not black, so I don't really know, but like based on what I've seen, I can't see any changes. Black men are still getting killed by the police are still institutionally racist. What has actually changed?
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I guess though it's why like conversations are so important. And I know I keep saying conversations.
No, but it is.
But I think that like people are so afraid to talk about racism. Like it's awkward sometimes to bring up the conversation in a room. And it can sometimes be, especially like as a black woman, it can be scary sometimes, and it can make me feel unsafe if someone brings up the topic and it's like I don't really want to say what I really feel, because it's like I don't want to be, it's so easy for people to kind of demonize you as the angry black woman, the kind of stereotype. Yeah, exactly. But I think that kind of people and like allies as well in various communities, depending on whether it's like homophobia and like trans rights issues or racism, I think it's important for people to have those conversations. I don't think all of the responsibility should be on black people or on trans people or on women, or you know what I mean? Like
I know what you mean. I guess there's always the fear from like, I'm obviously a straight white man. I'm not oppressed in the slightest. Well, compared to in like the oppression Olympics, I'm definitely last. I'm last place. I'm in the relegation zone. I'm like Derby a couple of seasons back in the Premier League.
I love all the spots.
Yeah, I know.
Sounds like you've been practicing.
I was practicing all of it.
I think that kind of the idea of people getting cancelled that has kind of become a thing since I don't know. I guess maybe it's TikTok was the start of that. People being
I'd
like,
say
you are
that-
cancelled.
I
Like,
think it went back. I think it's gone further. It's like Twitter, like 2015, like rise of like SJW Rex compilations.
Yeah.
I say that's where it comes from. That idea of cancel culture. But then for cancel culture, I don't think it actually exists. It's just another way of saying the word like accountability and holding people accountable for the things that they say and do.
but I think the idea of cancel culture really makes people more afraid to take accountability, and it makes people more likely to just be like I didn't do it or whatever. And
Double down.
I always find apologies really funny.
Yeah.
Like, because it's like I'm just like, I don't know how some people can get it so wrong. Like, what's her name? That woman.
Ukulele woman. Yeah.
I'm like, that is the most manipulative, gaslighting apology video I've seen in my whole
I think she
life.
monetized that video, or like she
Exactly.
copyrighted it so people couldn't use it. And it's like you're just trying to make money off of like very serious allegations.
It's so strange, so strange. But I think a lot of it is like that kind of thing, and people making such ridiculous apologies is rooted in people not being able to admit that they're wrong, and that kind of fear of being able
Like
to admit that
deflecting
you're
from
wrong.
it. It's like, oh, I'm singing this really silly song about cancel culture, and it's like, no, you've been accused of being a groomer.
Yeah.
Like, address it. My favorite apology is the notes apology.
The notes.
The notes apology. You know when people like type up an apology on their notes, screenshot
It's like
it and post it.
and it makes it so much more serious as well. It's like, I couldn't say this. Like, people are afraid to admit sometimes that they're learning new things.
Yeah.
I think.
Or that they don't know a lot about something. I think definitely in like this day and age, it's like you have to be seen to be an expert. You know, like when the submersible thing is like, oh, I am done being an expert in foreign policy on Ukraine. I am now an expert in submersibles. Oh, I'm no longer an expert in submersibles. I'm now an expert in vaccines. It's like, no one has to be an expert in anything. You can learn to sit back and observe. Like, not everything needs a reaction. Just learn. Do you feel
I
that
guess-
pressure?
I definitely feel that pressure. That's why I feel quite like anxious when I come like this kind of thing, like podcasts, because I enjoy the control of being able to kind of like edit my videos how I want to, and if I don't know, if I don't like what I say, or if I kind of stumble over what I'm saying, then I can just record it, right?
Yeah.
I think that it's sort of, it relates maybe as a woman thing as well, as not being taken seriously. There's some things that it's just like people hate hearing me say.
What kind of topics?
I mean, people hate when I talk about billionaires and the rich people. People hate that so much.
Why do you think that is?
I think that there is a real like romanticization of what a lot of people imagine that their life could look like. And the idea that anyone could be a billionaire if they work hard enough, and hard work is kind of all you need to be able to achieve all of your dreams and all the money in the world. But I think people don't like hearing that they're closer, that most people are closer to becoming homeless than they are to being anywhere near being a billionaire.
Especially if you like idolize them and you're looking at these people like, I want to be like you, and then someone goes like, you're never going to be like them. Like let's say like if you want to become like a sports star, if you want to become a footballer, it's like, I'm going to train every day, I'm going to do this, and then someone at some point is going to go, you're 24, you're not making it as a pro. And like no one wants to hear that. No one wants to hear that like their big dream or something that they want to do isn't going to happen. And I guess it's that acceptance. So when, like, I guess with you talking about billionaires and being like, you know, these people aren't really as good as you think they are, that people take it personally because, like, as you said, that they want to be that person. And it's like, you're not that guy. And that's okay. That's honestly okay.
I think it is a very kind of like, the kind of idea of like the grind and stuff. It's very, it's related to like guys like Andrew Tate and like, oh, I've worked so hard. Like, I can't, he's another thing. People hate when I speak about Andrew Tate.
My
I got
videos
some
that they
videos
take,
reviewed.
yeah, same. It's so funny when I see it, and it's
like a cult.
It's like I was like, is this the Matrix?
Yeah. But I guess it's a very like kind of manly thing, like the kind of idea of like alpha men
and I guess that kind of links back to the Barbie film, where Ken goes back to Barbie Land and he's like, I'm going to be my Mojo Dojo Casa house, and I'm going to build it up, and I'm going to be so strong and dominant, and you could be my long distance non-committal girlfriend or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm seen to be, I don't care. And like when he wants to be emotional, he goes away and does it in his own room or does it away from everybody else. And it's like, just so key to open up. That's what I always say to people. I was very ill a couple of years back, and like a lot of the reason I became very ill was because I didn't feel like I could express it. And then when I finally felt comfortable enough to express it, it all sort of just comes out. So you end up feeling a little bit worse. But it's like, don't bottle it up. Let it out. Be, sing. You're Kenough, guys. We are Kenough. I hope I've said that in the right way because I never know how to say it. Is it Kenough?
I think that was Kenough, yeah.
Yeah, Kenough. I want to get that hoodie. But that's another thing. The commercialization from this, and again, like the impacts on the environment is going to be big. Etsy or ASOS are probably like drafting something up as we speak. Primark.
That is another thing, because I think that another thing that's kind of a point that should be made is the kind of the film is talking about kind of capitalism and kind of the impacts of late stage capitalism, but equally that's behind the scenes. That is kind of what is happening, like the ridiculous amount of promotion that has happened for the film and the pink buses everywhere, and it's been ridiculous.
It's like the joke, like kids in sweatshops making t-shirts that say like end child poverty. It's that, it kind of feels a bit to a certain extent like that. So the scene I was thinking of in my head was when they're thinking of like producing new Barbies, and they're like, no one wants to see that Barbie, and the whole goes, oh, but that's really going to be profitable. We will produce that. Or like when
they start making the Kens,
the Mojo Dojo Casa House, and there's Asim Chowdhury's character who's like, this is going to be a big hit. Like we're already selling out.
It's very strange that they're commenting on all of these things, but behind the scenes, it's the reality of what is actually.
Guess everyone's
happening.
A hypocrite. Everyone's a hypocrite
like
to a certain extent.
It could be seen as just advertisement for Barbies, and they're probably going to bring out lots of new Barbie dolls. I'm sure they've already started doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be an ordinary Barbie. I wonder what the ordinary Barbie will look like. But
just bog standard. What Barbie would you want to see produced?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm really a Barbie girl.
No, were you brats?
Well, I'm more of a Cabbage Patch girl.
Cabbage Patch. I don't remember Cabbage Patch.
I have this really, really ugly little. No, she's not ugly. She's beautiful.
Beautiful. Yeah.
But she's.
Women putting down other women is disgraceful.
Looks like a Victorian sort of child's doll. But I love her. Would you
like to see a Cabbage Patch girl film?
I'd love that. I think it'd be way more real.
No, I was going to read some of the reviews that we've that came through that I asked for.
From your
yeah, someone was like, so got one that said it was real as fuck, which I thought was pretty good. Someone said it's delayed and possibly banned in my country because of immoral agenda. I don't know what country that person's from, but that's interesting. It unashamedly slayed and made perfect points about how patriarchy hurts everyone. All I know is beach. Ryan Gosling with full stop. People said load of the consumption from it was off the back of exploited female workers in global south, which for me makes a lot of the messaging kind of void. It made me realise I am Kenough. It taught me a very important lesson. We are literally all Ryan Gosling. Someone said incoherent, but they didn't spell incoherent correctly. Only decent scene was the Ken beach fight. Okay. I liked the bit when the nuke went off. I think you were watching the wrong film. Solana, before you go, and thank you, it was a really interesting conversation that we've had. Is there anything that you'd like to promote? Share anything?
Follow my Instagram.
What is it, so people can?
My Instagram is Little Miss Solana. Follow for more stuff from me.
And next joining me is Julia. Julia, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
How was it? How was Glasgow?
Glasgow was fantastic as always. Absolutely lovely city. Have a lovely time up there.
Let's get into the discussion about the Barbie film. What did you think of it, first of all?
Oh my God, I got so many thoughts about this film. The first thing I want to say is just to zoom back a moment and think about what it is we're actually talking about here, because it's a phenomenon film, which doesn't happen that often, which to me is one of those situations where absolutely everybody has gone to see it, or they're going to go and see it, or they've got an opinion about it. And I think we haven't had a film like that for quite a long time. There's been sort of, obviously the pandemic stopped people from going to the cinema. And it's one of those summer blockbusters. Normally this time of year, you see them on the buses, you just think, oh yeah, okay, there's the kids' film du jour. I'm not going to bother to go and see that. It passes me by. I don't think about it. Or my friends will take their kids to see it and tell me about it, but it's not really very... And this time I was like, okay, this is something more interesting's going on here. So I was absolutely very curious to go and see it. And the next thing is I was really surprised at actually how great it was. I thought I was going to see something different than what I actually got, and how self-aware it was, and how it appealed to such an enormous demographic of people. And I was sitting next to an old lady in the cinema, and in front of me was a row of young girls, and then the woman that I'd gone to see it with has got 2 kids. And I haven't got children, but I absolutely loved it. I just thought, wow, this is an amazing situation. It can speak to so many people, and it can have something for everybody. So I was like, okay, this is doing something quite interesting. And I thought it was intelligent, it was fun, political, it's aesthetically and kind of imaginatively quite fresh. And I've just had so many conversations with people about it now over the last couple of weeks. People who've enjoyed it. I've argued with some people who've hated it. And it's really nice to have a moment like that, because quite often, I don't know about you, but you're sitting around talking to your friends about, oh, what have you seen on TV, or what films have you watched recently? And basically, they just tell you their Netflix algorithm, and it's probably very different from mine. So they're busy explaining to me a box set that they've just seen, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I had that on my list, but I can't be bothered with it now. And we end up having these weird conversations at cross purposes, where we're all like, oh, well, you must see this because, and none of us have seen the same thing. So it's actually been quite nice to have this moment where everybody's seen the film and got an opinion about it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's grossed around $1 billion over the last 3 weeks, so it's doing quite well. And clearly, the discussions that are going on are encouraging people to see it. So let's look at those discussions. Let's be positive first. What positive things are people saying about the film?
Well, I think it has this kind of, like I said, it's got this really fantastic moment of recognition in it. So you can go and see it as a 9-year-old, and you can see a kind of story about a doll. You can go and see it as a mom, and you can go and see the story about being a mom. You can go and see it as an older woman, and you can see reflected in it, the story about the woman who invented the Barbie doll. There were some really quite moving moments in it with older women. It's very funny. I mean, I think the other thing that's really fantastic about it is the storyline about Ken. Ryan Gosling's fantastic in it. Who would have thought that he, would have come out of some of those real kind of hardcore violent films and turned himself into this amazing Ken doll, and really quite amusing sort of set pieces with him in it. So that's one of the things I found very funny about it. And the other thing I thought that was fantastic about it were the sets, because you've got this really great sense of, it's almost like a play.
Yeah.
They've created these old school sets. There's no CGI, and actually you don't realize how used to CGI we've become. So when it's absent, there's something quite interesting about this, sort of like the Busby Berkeley movies. You've got everybody doing these fantastic set piece dances. So visually, it's wonderful to look at.
So, and then let's look at the negative stuff. What are the negative things that you've been hearing about the film?
Well, not so much stuff I've been hearing. I think some of it's not necessarily to do with the film itself, as to do with the kind of Hollywood machine around it, the amount of money that's been spent on it, the fact that we're spending money on a movie that's going to produce tons and tons of plastic waste.
Yeah.
The film is kind of self-aware enough about some of its flaws, I think, in various places, because there's the hilarious line in it where the grumpy daughter says, "Oh, you're Barbie. You've been making women feel miserable about themselves for 50 years or whatever." Yeah. It understands what it's the material of kind of what it's doing.
Something that you mentioned to me in our discussions before this, you said it was kind of, I want to ask you this question. Do you think that the Barbie film's commentary about patriarchy is ironic given Hollywood's track record of treating women badly?
Yeah, I do. But I also think that this is a really big moment for women directors to step out. I mean, we've never had a woman directing a film in Hollywood that's made billion. It's broken all the records. It's made $1 billion on its first weekend or its first couple of weekends. It's a real opportunity for somebody like Gerwig. We haven't had a sort of female Scorsese or a female Spielberg. Maybe this is their moment. Maybe this is the moment for someone like that to step out into the arena and actually perhaps do something different. And perhaps maybe the moment to notice how much some of those old Hollywood films were generically based on a particular kind of what we might consider to be masculine vision. Yeah. Particularly some of the Marvel films, which seem to me to be painting by numbers superhero movies, which all just did the same thing. You could tell from the beginning what was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I felt with the Barbie film, because I feel like everyone saw that this film was coming out and thought what was going to happen. I've said this earlier. I thought it was going to be like the Lego movie.
Exactly. Me too.
Yeah. And then what was presented, I was like, oh, this is actually quite refreshing. It feels like a very much original storyline to a certain degree. Do you think that this film will have a lasting impact, or do you think it will just people have forgotten about it by sort of September?
Yeah. Well, probably they'll have forgotten about it by September because other things will have come in and crowded out the space. But actually, I do think some of the things that she's done are going to change the way things are done in the future. I particularly think aesthetically, people are going to pay more attention to building sets and not doing CGI, because it feels like CGI has its space, but it's a bit like using auto-tune, for voices. It's kind of masking something, and actually she's shown us how you could do something differently and make it feel fresh. So I think that will change things. I think in terms of the politics, I think the fact that she is, like I said, like she's the female director taking that huge space. I mean, what a massive budget, what a big responsibility. She's taken something, she's proved she can do something new and different with it. I hope that will inspire new kinds of filmmaking. And I do think that since the Weinstein case, there has been a noticeable change in, and I'm talking again about Hollywood. Hollywood is a very specific place. It's set in LA. It's a very particular group of people with a particular group of aesthetics. It's very American. But nonetheless, I think there has been a change in kinds of women that we're seeing represented on film. And it takes a while for those changes to filter through into culture. But think about a movie like Tar, for example. I mean, that was listed for Oscars and Golden Globes. It was a film about an extremely complicated woman. Who knew that sort of thing would get that kind of Hollywood attention, or would get that kind of money and get made in that kind of context, I guess. And maybe under Weinstein, that wouldn't have happened. And you can certainly see, I think, looking back at some of the films that were made during the period where he was really at his peak, I did feel like a lot of the Hollywood actresses looked the same. And it feels to me, I mean, they're quite, again, knowing about it in the Barbie movie. I think there's a moment where Helen Mirren's character makes an aside about Margot Robbie being not being the best example of somebody who should say, oh, I feel ugly or whatever. They're kind of aware. It's quite self-aware. And also there's quite a large range of actors in that, in the Barbie world. They've got, they're trying to be diverse in the way that they represent the characters.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest sort of takeaway from the Barbie film is?
Oh, well, for me, I think one of the biggest takeaway, and for me as a sort of teacher of storytelling and writing and thinking about how stories filter into culture, is how many different people, how many people have come away from the film with a different story. They've all been to see the same film, but they've all got a different idea of what they've seen. So, the 7-year-old can see a very simple film that she might then watch as a teenager and think, oh my God, how did they get away with that? Do you know what I mean? So
I know what you mean.
There are many different ways that you can see it. I can go and see it and get a bit annoyed about the fact that maybe it doesn't quite push the feminism as much as it did. And yet when I hear someone criticizing it, I actually feel a bit defensive. So there's a sort of interesting, it's interesting to see some of the responses that my friends have had. Some of them have really loved the musical parts of it. Some of them have hated it. Some of them have felt the feminism wasn't good enough. Other ones have thought that the speech, the great speech that happens at the end, where America Ferrera's character gives this great speech about what it's like to be a woman full of contradictions. Women have been crying and dumping their boyfriends on the back of that speech. So it's all very well for me to say, oh, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
It's moved people. So, and I can see that in a writing workshop. We'll set a story for everybody to read, and you'll have 14 different people having read a different story. And to me, that means it was a good piece of work. It's a good art. It's worked in some ways. Everybody's come away from the film with something.
Yeah, no, it definitely feels that way.
Some of the sort of problems with it, I mean, the culture that produces it, the sheer amount of money that's been spent on it. And I do have a sort of nagging sense that it's difficult to smash the patriarchy when you're on its payroll. It's a film that's very much centered around white Western feminism. Where's the sweatshop Barbie? Who's going to be making the dolls that everybody's going to buy on the back of it?
Maybe they'll do that in the sequel.
And there's a really tasteless joke, I think, about Indigenous women, which probably it shouldn't have been in it. About
what joke was that?
Oh, it's a real throwaway line where she says something like, "Oh, it's just like 1500 with the Indians and smallpox."
Oh.
It's just a bit like, oh, okay, But no piece of art is perfect. I mean, that's not to excuse it for its oversights. I think they probably could have got rid of that joke and no one would have noticed, except for the people who felt disenfranchised by it. But every piece of work is inevitably going to be limited. But for something that has such an enormous budget behind it, that comes from a very particular kind of Hollywood regime where we're used to seeing things that have a particular kind of paint by numbers relationship with the audience, with storytelling, and particularly with gender roles, I just thought, wow, this is really kind of out of the park. I give her 5 stars for taking that opportunity and really twisting it into something new.
Well, I guess that's what they did. They kind of showed the patriarchy in reverse at the start, and then by the end, the thing that I took away was when the Kens say, "Well, can we have a representative on the Supreme Court?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, you can have like something like a minor role." And I guess that is kind of reflected in our society to a certain extent, whether that be sort of representation of women, representation of people of color. So it felt kind of like at the end, it's like even though everyone thinks that things have changed, they haven't. And I guess when we have certain moments of cultural significance, particularly over the last few years, where it feels like, yeah, people say that there's going to be change, but now sort of a couple years on, do we feel that there's been any of that change? And obviously for me as a white man, I won't notice that change, but for other people, maybe they do. But I personally can't see that change.
No, and I think the other thing that's interesting to me about the film is that it's coming at a really interesting moment where things are intersecting with the climate crisis. And I think for me as well, watching it, this business of plastic and plastic dolls, and Barbie being the most plastic of plastic dolls, and Barbie world being very plastic, I thought there was a weird kind of nostalgia in it, because it is looking at Barbie's been around since forever. Most women, even the old woman sitting next to me in the cinema probably had a Barbie doll. They've been around since the 1950s. Are we still going to have the plastic to produce Barbie dolls in the future? I wonder, and that kind of plasticized culture and that kind of aesthetic and that kind of way of looking at things. It was almost on the verge of being nostalgic about that being the past, I thought. I don't know. I mean, how much budget people will have in the future for making those kinds of movies, et cetera, because it felt like that kind of world had almost passed and now it's suddenly come back.
Yeah,
I felt there was a nostalgia attached to it, which was quite interesting too, which I think was also part of the live action sets, the way that the sets hark back to the 1950s kind of buzzly, but on 1940s movies.
I guess, sort of, yeah, long term, what's going to be implications? I've heard talks that apparently Mattel want to do not like a Marvel Cinematic Universe style thing, but they want to take other Mattel toys and it's like, don't ruin it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, keep it as a standalone, like maybe do a sequel in a couple of years' time when everyone's a bit more self-aware, but it feels like it's very much of its time, and I'm sure it will win a fair few awards because it was a good film. So I want to look at the sort of the negative reaction to it, and obviously we've sort of talked about this with sort of the right-wing edgelords that dominate our internet sphere. I'm thinking, Ben Shapiro putting Barbie dolls in a bin and setting fire to them, which is completely normal behaviour. Him with his notepad showing it, which I tried taking notes watching the Barbie film, and I had to stop because I couldn't actually see, which proves to me this guy is a next level hater to try and do this. Why do you think people on the right in particular have reacted so negatively to the Barbie film?
Oh, I got quite a lot of theories about that. I mean, for me, that was personally really ironic, because my first novel, which was published in the late 90s, which is about women and body image, ends with the 2 girls setting fire to their Barbies on a barbecue.
Oh, wow.
And then you have Ben Shapiro, and of course, they're doing it in order to sort of assert their sense of ownership over their own bodies. And then you got Ben Shapiro putting the Barbie dolls in a bin and setting fire to them in the name of kind of right-wing, sort of anti-woke right-wing disgust. And I was like, wow, that's a reversal. What an extraordinary change of meaning. Suddenly the Barbie doll that has become synonymous with impossible beauty standards has become synonymous with woke leftism. I know.
Who would have thought it? We owe her an apology. We weren't familiar with her game.
And I think if you put him through the kind of machine of the film, what would he be doing? The weird Barbie who's been played with too hard. What version of the sort of destroyed Barbie is going to turn up in Barbie world, having been burnt in the bin by Ben Shapiro?
Anti-woke Barbie, that would be something to see.
Anti-woke Barbie, yeah, that would be quite amusing. I mean, I think we need to remember that outrage makes money, and that outrage makes money in America particularly around the way that the internet functions. And I thought his unhinged rant had given him probably quite a lot of traction because there was so much clickbait around that. I saw everybody going on about it. And of course, that means people click on it to see what he's been saying. And I think it shows us more about the polarization of the culture that exists in which the film has been made rather than anything particular about the film itself. I think whatever it is, they're always going to be against it because being against it is going to get them an audience. So part of me dismisses it, but then another part of me was ever so slightly disquieted by the fact that there is some pretty nasty kickback against it as a feminist film. I sort of like, and I sort of feel some of that is a fear response. I think quite a lot of that kind of really authoritarian telling people what to do with their bodies is either a desire to protect what it is you feel like you already have, or a fear that somehow they're coming for you and they're going to take it away from you. And I think both of those things have been expressed. Piers Morgan's another one. I just think he's doing it for the click.
Yeah, it's a grift.
He's just doing it to get some attention because that's the only way he knows how to monetize his rather lowly intelligence.
Yeah.
He hasn't got anything else to do.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I guess it is kind of the idea of, well, I know that if I pretend to be mad about this, I'm sure at some point I can convince myself that I'm as angry about it as I plan to be.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you when you went to see it, but there was a genuine sense of kind of occasion about it, which I haven't experienced in the cinema, I don't think, since I'd been to see a Star Wars film.
Right.
Or I don't know, what was the last time I really felt an occasion? It was a long time since I went to the cinema and everybody was there genuinely anticipating having a good time and then at the end clapping. People, especially British audiences.
Yeah, I know. That's like a very American thing. Like I've seen when they've watched like superhero films, for example, and they're up and cheering, and it's like, you're not watching a football team. Sit down, stay quiet, eat your popcorn, and then leave when you're done. There's none of this whooping and cheering in British cinemas. And I think, but no, I see what you mean. I saw people dressing up and going, taking photos. It seemed like an occasion. Obviously, there's the whole Oppenheimer thing as well going on. So I guess it was kind of, that's what helped build up this.
The other thing I love about it is that Barbie does genuinely have a moment of existential. It's always philosophical, the film, too. There's a brilliant moment in it when things are starting to go wrong in Barbie world, and she's like, she starts to worry about death. She has feelings about dying. She has this existential moment of like, oh, well, maybe that's what it means to be human. And I wonder, in a way, whether or not the Barbie movie isn't dealing with existential crisis better than Oppenheimer.
Yeah, I guess that is the case.
I just thought it was quite philosophically quite funny. And again, another way in which very cleverly the layers in the dialogue, there are so many things that you could latch onto. There are so many ways in which you can view the film.
Yeah, no, I think it's definitely of its time, and I'm sure people will talk about it for years to come. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we wrap up?
No, other than that, I would just encourage people who haven't been to see it to actually go and see it, because it's worth having. A good art, in my view, is prismatic. So we see ourselves in it too, and maybe that means that you go to it and think of it, and it makes you feel grumpy. Well, good, it did something, it achieved something, it created a feeling. I always think it's cheering to see something that works, rather than sort of being forced to view another kind of turgid summer blockbuster that's just going to flog the popcorn to the kids and nobody's going to enjoy it. Or like you said, another Lego movie.
Yeah. No, don't diss the Lego movie. I love the Lego movie.
No, they're good actually.
Yeah, I know.
It was the Marvel films that suddenly fell off a bit.
I guess that's the thing. I think everything since like Avengers Endgame has kind of felt like a don't know, like an extent, like a DLC, something like that on like a video game, where like it's just like something to add on, and you're like, you should have just stopped at a certain point, like with The Walking Dead at a certain point as well. To be fair, I guess with all of this stuff, you need to be aware of like when to finish it.
Yes, how can you spend so much money on something and make it so mediocre? It's like, if you're going to have loads and loads and loads of money to spend on making something, then do a good job of it. And I think that's, for me, one of the things I really admire Greta Gerwig for. She spent that money on good sets and on making it on, every frame has got something in it.
Well, let's hope it paves the way for better stuff. Julia, thank you so much for joining us with this discussion. We really appreciate you having you on.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for all of you listening. And we really appreciate over the last week the surge in followers and listeners, and it honestly means the world. So thank you so much. And please join us for the next episode. Goodbye.